The message had been sent in desperation. It was a last-ditch cry for help, flung into the endless dark by a civilization on the brink of extinction. The Zorathi, a peaceful and once prosperous race of crystalline beings, had thrived for centuries. Their planet, Halarith Prime, was a garden world, lush, serene, and teeming with biodiversity. But that peace shattered when the Zorvax arrived. The Zorvax didn't come to negotiate. They came to conquer. In less than a standard cycle, entire cities were reduced to rubble. Their advanced orbital cannons cracked the crust of Halarith's moon, letting debris rain down like a divine punishment. Billions were gone. The Zorathi had nothing left. No ships, no weapons, no hope. And so, someone, no one remembers who anymore, activated the ancient beacon, a device so old and dangerous that it had been locked away in myth, buried beneath the capital's temple ruins. Its creators were long extinct, its purpose mostly forgotten. But it still worked. When it powered on, it sent a signal on frequencies older than most modern empires. A simple message, carried in every known tongue. This world is lost. If there is any mercy left in the stars, help us. They didn't expect a reply. Not from the Empyrean coalition, who had already condemned them to die. Not from the trade unions, who cared more about their profits than lives. And definitely not from Earth. Earth, humanity, the Deathworlders. No one really knew what humans were anymore. Stories, mostly. Rumors of a species born from a hell world where nearly everything wanted to kill them. Toxic air, freezing poles, lava-spewing mountains, and endless deserts. Evolution had made them fierce. Technology had made them deadly. The last time they made an appearance in galactic affairs, they turned a minor border dispute into the fall of a major warlord. But that was centuries ago. Then they vanished, closed their borders, pulled out of the central systems, cut all diplomatic ties. The other species stopped asking questions. Best not to wake the sleeping beast, they said. And yet, it was the Deathworlders who answered. 7 days after the SOS went out, something tore through the void near Halarith Prime. At first, the Zorvax thought it was another asteroid. Then the scans came in. One ship. Colossal. Black. Silent. Then another. And another. Until the stars themselves seemed to vanish beneath a swarm of steel titans, armed with weapons no known civilization dared to use anymore. Kinetic rail drivers large enough to shoot continents in half. AI-guided swarms that feasted on circuitry, energy lances that danced through shielding like paper. The Deathworlders had arrived. But they didn't answer the call with diplomacy. They didn't offer evacuations. They didn't even ask who was right or wrong. They came to wage war. The first strike was on the Zorvac command station, orbiting Halarith's outer ring. No warning. One moment it was there, the next, a flicker of blinding white turned the sky into a second sun. The shockwave turned nearby asteroids into shimmering dust. The humans said nothing. They just kept coming. By the second day, the Zorvac ground forces tried to retreat. Their warships fled into slipspace corridors, only to find human warships already waiting. The Deathworlders had mapped their routes before striking. It wasn't war. It was annihilation. From the caves of shattered Halarith, the remaining Zorathi watched the heavens burn. Their children clutched their soft bodies tighter, humming the old songs of survival. No one knew if this was rescue or vengeance. But it was swift. It was brutal. And it was far from over. The question that lingered, whispered among survivors like ghost stories in the dark, wasn't, why did they help us? It was, what woke them up? The smoke hadn't even cleared when the ground began to tremble. The Zorathi huddled in their shelters beneath the ruins of their once glorious capital, unsure if the vibrations were more Zorvac bombardments, or something worse. The youngest among them cried in low-frequency keening, the sound resonating through the crystal-infused walls. Elders remained still, as if motion might invite more destruction. Then came the sound, a deep, pulsing hum. Not natural, mechanical, controlled. One of the lookout drones, an ancient spherical orb barely functioning, floated toward the surface from the shelter's access tunnel. Its sensor lights blinked erratically, struggling to adjust in the smoke-choked atmosphere. It hovered upward, through cracks in the ceiling, catching glimpses of what waited above. It froze, and then it screamed. Not vocally, but through a data burst so sharp and sudden it shorted out 2 relay nodes. The surviving Zorathi engineers scrambled to interpret the data, and what they saw made their crystal skin dull with shock. Humans. On the ground. They had landed. Tall, encased in obsidian armor that reflected no light, no insignias, no names. Only the dull crimson glow of their visors and the black, vulture-like ships behind them, anchored to the ground with talons that cracked bedrock. They moved with calculated silence. No shouts, no orders, only gestures. Units swept through bombed-out streets, not to kill, but to confirm something. Drones accompanied them, scanning every fallen structure, every melted archway of Zorathi history, as if cataloging the destruction. But the Zorvacs weren't entirely gone. From a half-collapsed spire across the valley, a mounted plasma turret roared to life, lighting the smoke-orange sky with streaks of deadly green. It aimed directly at the lead human squad. The Zorathi survivors flinched. The humans didn't. Instead, a small cylindrical object shot from one of the soldiers' arms, arcing lazily through the air. It made no sound, no flare, just a soft clink as it landed near the turret. Then, silence. For 2 seconds. Then the turret, the Zorvac soldiers operating it, and most of the tower they were hiding in disappeared in a flash of implosive collapse, sucked inward by a gravity burst, crushed like tin before even the echo of the explosion could register. Still, the humans didn't speak. They just kept moving. Deep beneath the surface, Elder Thalrix of the Zorathi stood before the remaining Council of 9. Only 4 were still alive. They do not act as liberators, he said slowly. They kill with precision, with hate. This is not a rescue. It is a reckoning. One of the elders, younger and more idealistic, trembled. But they answered our call. Isn't that what matters? No, Thalrix said coldly. What matters is why they answered. And that question still burned like acid in his thoughts. Elsewhere, on the bridge of the lead human ship, named Oblivion's Mercy, according to translated data tags, Commander Vera Kale watched the aftermath from orbit. She leaned forward, brushing ash off her uniform, and whispered to her second-in-command. That's the last Zorvac stronghold on the planet. Ready the orbital purge. Her XO, a man with dead eyes and a voice like broken gravel, responded. Do we initiate contact with the Zorathi survivors now? Vera shook her head. Not yet. We need confirmation first. Confirmation of what, ma'am? She didn't look at him when she replied. Of who sold them out. There it was. The twist. This wasn't just a rescue. This was an operation. Coordinated. Planned. And whatever the humans were here for, it was more than vengeance. It had layers. Someone had crossed them. Someone had made the mistake of thinking Earth had truly gone quiet. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity could do when provoked. Now they were being reminded. Not with words, but with fire. The Zorathi didn't know fear in the way organics did, not in the gut-churning, sweat-drenched panic of mammals or reptilians, but they did understand dread. And dread was thick now, saturating the subterranean shelter like a toxic fog. Above them, The sky no longer burned with Zorvak bombardments. Now it trembled under something more methodical, controlled. One Zorathi child, her crystalline carapace cracked from a prior blast, whispered the question that had haunted them all. Are the humans angry with us? No one answered. Elder Thalrix had remained silent for hours, perched near the ancient beacon's shell, its surface now dim and inert. The device had served its purpose, but he feared it had summoned more than salvation. The Deathworlders' silence was louder than the Zorvak's violence. They didn't broadcast open frequencies. They didn't offer medevac, food drops, or even reassurance. They came like ghosts born from a machine god's wrath, and left nothing behind. Above ground, the human ground teams had already established perimeter lockdowns around known Zorvak excavation zones. Not just military zones, but dig sites. That raised even more alarms. Why would humans care about ancient Zorvak digs? Because they weren't Zorvak in origin. The ruins predated even the Zorvak Empire. Buried beneath Halorith's crust were structures the Zorathi had always left undisturbed. The locals called them veins of the first flame, remnants from a pre-sentient era. The Zorvaks, arrogant as ever, had tried to mine them, and it seemed the humans knew that. Back aboard Oblivion's Mercy, Commander Vera Kale stood before a hologram flickering with decoded layers of Halorith's substructure. Artificial lines, long hidden beneath molten rock, glowed faintly like arteries. Get me orbit to core penetration scans. Focus on these ancient lines. The AI's voice was smooth, almost kind, an eerie contrast to the destruction it orchestrated. Confirmed. Subsurface network matches configuration class, precursor black. Vera's brow tensed. She knew that code. Everyone in Earth's command core did. The precursor black sites weren't just old, they were restricted, forbidden to touch, forbidden to disturb. Because last time someone did, Earth lost an entire colony. That's what this really was. Not vengeance, not a rescue, not even war. It was containment. Far below, Thalrix finally gathered the courage to issue a direct transmission. Against the advice of his surviving council, he accessed the ancient Zorathi relay stones, still functional under layers of dust and history. He spoke in galactic standard. Loud, clear, desperate. To the humans who now walk our skies and burn our soil, this is Elder Thalrix of the Halorith Zorathi. I speak not as a leader, but as a survivor. We summoned help, and you came. But we do not understand your purpose. We ask only this. Are we your enemy? There was no reply for a full hour. Then the humans answered, not with a message, with a transmission, a burst of decrypted Zorvak logs, thousands of hours of footage, surveillance, communications, field reports, all funneled to Thalrix's ancient terminal in a single flash. His eyes widened as he scrolled through them. The Zorvaks hadn't come to Halorith for conquest. That was just the cover. They had found something buried, something that spoke in codes older than stars. And worst of all, someone gave them the coordinates. From the decrypted data, the origin tag was clear. Coalition Central Intelligence, the same Empyrean coalition that had refused to intervene when the Zorathi begged for aid. The same coalition that had warned the galaxy never to disturb precursor black sites. They had broken their own laws. They had sent the Zorvaks to dig where they themselves dared not. And when things spiraled out of control, they let the Zorathi burn, because it was easier to cover it up. Thalrix's voice cracked into static. Oh, gods! That's why the humans came. Not to save anyone, not to destroy the Zorvaks, but to bury the secret, and anyone who uncovered it. The Deathworlders weren't just fighting a war, they were erasing evidence. The first time Elder Thalrix truly feared for his people wasn't when the Zorvax arrived. It was now. He stood in the dim glow of the beacon chamber, the human transmission still playing across the fractured walls of his data stone. The truth was unmistakable, stamped in time-coded data, in intercepted coalition messages, and in the brutal clarity of galactic betrayal. The Zorvax had been sent. Sent. The Empyrean coalition had orchestrated the entire attack, and Earth had known. He stumbled backward, gripping a support pillar as his legs trembled beneath him. The revelation echoed through his mind like a scream underwater. The Zarathi weren't victims of war. They were the cleanup site of a galactic conspiracy. Above, the humans were sweeping the last of the Zorvac resistance from the cratered ruins of the capital. Drones flew in precise patterns, scanning not for survivors, but for data fragments. Black-armored soldiers moved through libraries, archives, and subterranean vaults, not rescuing, not assisting, erasing. Back aboard Oblivion's Mercy, Commander Kale watched the operation unfold in silence. She had spent 2 decades in Earth's Black Ops wing. She'd seen what happened when someone uncovered a precursor black site. The madness that followed, the distortion fields, the whispers in the deep data streams. She'd buried a colony of 140,000 with her own hands once. Hallerith was worse. This wasn't just a dig site. The Zorvax had activated something. The seismic data showed rising pulses, like a heartbeat, coming from beneath the crust. Faint, rhythmic, and artificial. "Ma'am," her comms officer said, voice tight. "Drone teams report a gate structure 300 meters below Sector 5. Massive, inert. But it's waking up." Kyle stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened. "Prep the fusion core. Full planetary sterilization protocol." The officer hesitated. "That will wipe out the Zarathi." Kale didn't blink. "They're already dead. They just don't know it yet." Deep below, the survivors in the caverns were starting to understand the silence. No supplies, no medics, no contact. The humans were treating Hallerith like a contaminated zone. Some Zarathi still hoped it was oversight. Maybe the humans didn't know they were down here. Maybe once the Zorvax were gone, the Deathworlders would offer aid. Thalrix knew better. He looked at the council. Only 2 other elders now, their crystalline forms dulled by grief, and spoke with hollow certainty. "They're going to destroy the planet." The younger elder gasped. "But why? The Zorvax are defeated." "No." Thalrix raised the data stone, letting it project the flickering gate beneath the surface. "It's not about the Zorvax. It's what they uncovered. The precursor site. It's active." "And you think the humans want to destroy it?" Thalrix's voice was calm. "They want to bury it forever, like they've done before. They've become the universe's janitors, burning anything that threatens their precious order." He paused, then added with bitter venom. "They answered our SOS, not to save us. To keep the secret from getting out." On the surface, Sector 5 had been evacuated. Human troops cleared a 5-kilometer radius around the breach site. Massive mechanical walkers positioned fusion cores the size of buildings around the perimeter. This wasn't war. It was a ritual, an incantation of annihilation. The gate pulsed beneath the earth, each beat stronger than the last. Scans couldn't read beyond it. Eye sensors failed. Even Vera Kale, for all her steel, felt something creeping at the edge of her thoughts, like a presence, watching. She didn't know what the precursor gate did. No one did. But the standing order from Earth Command was clear. No gate must remain active. Thalrix knew there was no way out, no ships, no external help. The beacon had brought only doom. But as he stared at the ancient systems, he felt something deep within the planet. A pull. Maybe the gate wasn't just a weapon. Maybe it was a door to salvation or damnation. He had no idea which. But if the humans were willing to scorch an entire world to keep it shut, he had to open it. The tunnels beneath Halarith trembled, not from explosions, but from something far older, something stirring. Elder Thalrix moved through the ancient catacombs like a man possessed. Dust cascaded from the ceilings as the tremors intensified, cascading in short, sharp bursts, almost like a heartbeat. And each pulse came with a faint hum, low, vibrating through the crystal of his bones. The other survivors followed him, not because they understood, but because they had nothing left. The surface was a kill zone. The humans weren't coming to save them, and the only remaining path led deeper, toward the gate. The structure, visible now through broken layers of earth and stone, wasn't built in any recognizable geometry. It hurt to look at. The angles were wrong, shifting subtly when you weren't watching them. Its surface shimmered, not with light, but with a memory of light, as though it was reflecting something that hadn't happened yet. It didn't speak, but every mind in that chamber felt it. Curiosity, hunger, awareness. Thalrix approached cautiously. His steps slowed as he drew within meters of the massive arch. Symbols flickered across its edge, symbols he didn't know he knew. They resonated deep inside his skull like a forgotten lullaby. One phrase surfaced in his mind, unbidden and terrifyingly clear. Do not awaken what cannot forget. But it was already too late. On the surface, Commander Vera Kyle stood atop the primary detonation command rig. The 3 fusion cores were in position. Each was capable of vaporizing an entire continent. All units clear of Sector 5, her XO reported. Gate site is primed for sterilization. Kyle stared at the trembling Earth. Sensors screamed static. Drone feeds collapsed one by one. Something inside the gate was interfering now, not passively. It was resisting. She tapped into the command network, connecting to Earth Command through the tight beam relay. We're ready, she said. Final confirmation? The voice on the other end was cold. Male, authoritative. Confirmed. Do not let the signal breach containment. Burn the gate. Burn the planet. Leave no record. Kyle closed the channel. This was what the Deathworlders did best. Not diplomacy, not peacekeeping. Erasure. Thalrix stood before the gate as it pulsed with something close to life. He didn't know how to open it. But he also didn't need to. It was already reacting. The ancient crystal lattice embedded in his chest, a remnant of the Zarathi's earliest evolution, began to glow faintly. The same glow that had once bonded them to Halarith, when they believed their species had been chosen by something beyond comprehension. A voice, not heard, but felt, whispered across his consciousness. You are not ready, but you are desperate. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The others recoiled, their faces twisted in silent horror as the gate's surface began to fold inward, like space itself was turning inside out, not opening, peeling, and through that impossible seam they saw something. Shapes, movement, things that twisted and writhed not in space, but in concept. Ideas given monstrous form. One of the survivors screamed and fell, clutching their head. Another started laughing, loud, wild, and wrong. Thalrix gritted his teeth. I didn't come for power, he whispered through bloodied lips. I came because they betrayed us, because the humans will kill us anyway, because there is no place for us now. The gate listened. The shapes behind the veil paused. Then one of them stepped through. It didn't move like anything that should exist. It unfolded into space, its body a contradiction, its form changing with every blink. But it didn't attack. It simply watched. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in understanding. We remember Earth. Alarms screamed aboard Oblivion's Mercy. Every monitor on the bridge flickered into static. Kyle turned to her comms officer, but he was staring at the display, wide-eyed. "Ma'am, something is coming through the gate." "What kind of something?" she snapped. He didn't answer. The feed stabilized for just a second, and Kyle saw it, that thing, that shape. And then she understood. The sterilization wasn't just protocol, it was fear. The gate didn't hide power, it hid retribution. The shape that emerged from the gate was silence incarnate. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that made your ears ring, made your thoughts slow, made the world seem paused. It didn't walk. It didn't float. It simply was, like a concept made flesh. Geometry bent near it, colors dulled, and time felt uncertain. And in its presence, Elder Thalrix no longer felt like a survivor. He felt like a child standing before the memory of a god. The others had fallen to their knees, unable to process what they were seeing. One of the younger Zarathi started sobbing, not with sadness, but relief. Something ancient, something buried deep in their crystalline biology, recognized the being. The gate pulsed once more behind it, then shut with a silent ripple. Whatever connection it had formed was now sealed, and what had come through was staying. The being turned its impossible face toward Thalrix. He didn't hear words, but he felt a presence brush against the edges of his mind, sifting through memories, pain, and betrayal. And then a single, unified thought formed. They lied to you. About us, about everything. Thalrix fell forward, breath catching in his throat. "What? Are you?" he rasped. "We are the price of forgetting." Above ground, Oblivion's mercy was chaos. The seismic pulses had stopped, but not because the threat was gone. Scanners were completely blind, comms were scrambled, and every soldier on the surface began receiving the same thing on their HUDs. A message. Unprompted. Unwelcome. "Earth remembers the crime." Vera Kale stood frozen on the command deck, eyes fixed on the central monitor. The transmission had hijacked her system. A crude, pulsing symbol was displayed. A triangle folding into itself, over and over, endlessly. "Where is this coming from?" she barked. "From inside the gate site," her officer replied. "It's broadcasting through every frequency. Subspace, tachyon, even visual spectrum. We can't block it. We can't trace it." Kale's face tightened. She activated the override on the fusion cores. "Manual detonation," she ordered. "Now." But the interface wouldn't respond. Error after error. Denied access. Code scrambled in real time. And then, one final denial, written in stark, simple script. "You've been seen." Kyle backed away from the console. She wasn't afraid of death. She'd faced worse. But this wasn't death. This was exposure. Earth's greatest fear wasn't destruction. It was being understood. The gate was doing exactly that, showing itself, showing them. Below, the being moved through the Zarathi like a ghost through memories. It didn't speak in commands. It didn't promise salvation. It simply gave them something they hadn't felt in years. Context. Flashes of history danced through Thalrix's mind. Images of ancient civilizations torn apart by fear. Of the first Deathworlder explorers who found these gates and sealed them, not to protect others, but to hide what they had done. Humanity had once touched something far beyond comprehension. Not gods, not demons, but an awareness that expected responsibility. Balance, but Earth, being Earth, feared anything it couldn't control. So it ran. It burned. It buried the gates and silenced the truth. Then it rewrote the past. And now the gate was open again, not to conquer, but to remind. Back on the bridge of Oblivion's mercy, Kale gave the final order. "All ships, retreat, full fleet. Fall back to the lunar divide and await further orders." The fleet began to move, reluctantly. But Kale remained, standing alone as the last dropships lifted away. She didn't run. She knew what came next wasn't survival. It was reckoning, and Earth would feel it, because the galaxy had changed. The lie was exposed. The thing they feared most, their secrets, were now in motion. In the ruins of Halarith, the strange being turned one final time to Thalrix. The gate will stay shut, unless Earth returns. And with that, it dissolved, not vanishing, but folding itself back into the soil, into memory. The ground was quiet. The tremors ceased, but above, satellites began to blink. All across the galaxy, ancient gates long thought dead began to flicker. One by one, they were waking up. The stars had changed. Every deep space observatory from the Orion Belt to the outer confluence was picking up the same impossible signal. Synchronized pulses from ancient precursor gate structures. Gates thought dead, buried, sealed by generations of fear and lies. Now, they were all online. Across 100 systems, ancient ruins pulsed with light older than recorded time. Colonies built atop them began to tremble. Civilizations that had forgotten the truth were now standing on the edge of it, terrified by the same hum that echoed across Halarith days before. And Earth? Earth was silent, not because it didn't know, but because it knew exactly what it had done. On Halarith's scarred surface, the ash was finally beginning to settle. The humans had left, not all of them. Some died during the last signal breach, minds shattered by whatever stepped through the gate. But the Warfleet was gone. Fled. And for the first time since the Zorvak siege, there was quiet. Elder Thalrix stood among the wreckage, his old limbs aching from exhaustion and revelation. Around him, the surviving Zorathi emerged from the tunnels like exiles returning to a homeland they no longer recognized. The gate no longer pulsed. Whatever had come through had returned to slumber, but the planet had been marked, changed. So had they. Thalrix addressed the gathered survivors, voice amplified through the remaining crystal communicators. Brothers, sisters, we are not who we thought we were. He lifted a hand, revealing the etched shard embedded in his chest, now glowing faintly. We are not just victims. We were witnesses. And now we are the keepers of something Earth tried to destroy. There were murmurs, some fearful, some angry, others just numb. But no one interrupted him. Not now. Earth feared what lay beneath this soil, he continued, so much that they came not with aid, but with fire, because they knew that what was buried here, what the Zorvaks uncovered, would reveal their betrayal. He gestured toward the silent gate behind him. But what they feared has changed. It has chosen not to destroy us. Not yet. It gave us knowledge, and that makes us dangerous. He let the words hang, not as a threat, but as a truth. Far beyond Halarith, in the throne spires of the Empyrean Coalition, panic was a currency now traded in secret meetings and encrypted bursts. Earth had gone completely dark. No communications, no justification, no explanation for the withdrawal from Halarith. Only whispers. Rumors of a gate opening, of something stepping through. The Council demanded answers. But Earth offered none. Its ambassadorial channels were offline, its embassies closed. It had become a shadow again, just like after the Venari collapse, when it erased an entire moon to hide the first gate. Now it was happening again. But this time, too many had seen. The Zorvaks were gone. The Deathworlders had retreated. But the truth was still out there, and it was moving. Deep inside a black site buried beneath Earth's old lunar surface, High Command operatives stared at a hollow map blinking with red points of light. Each point was a gate. Each gate was active. "We've lost containment," one of the analysts whispered. General Halberd, The man overseeing the Earth defense protocols nodded grimly. Then we initiate Tier 0. A technician hesitated. Tier 0 is planetary strike authorization. Sir, that includes dozens of inhabited worlds. Halberd cut him off. If those gates open, we don't have dozens of worlds. We have none. Silence. Then, reluctantly, the technician complied. Back on Halarith, Thalric stood alone at the base of the gate, wind whipping across the ruined plain. He knew what would come next. Earth would not let this go, but they couldn't stop it anymore, because this wasn't a threat that could be bombed, sterilized, or forgotten. This was memory incarnate, and across the stars others were waking up too. Other worlds, other peoples, civilizations that once trembled before Earth's wrath were now receiving the same pulses, the same knowledge, the same choice. Stay silent, or remember. The Deathworlders had answered the SOS with war. But now, the gates were answering, and they weren't sending warships. They were sending truth. The final dawn on Halarith was not one of peace. It was one of understanding. The sky had gone quiet, no longer split by missiles, dropships, or fusion detonations. The clouds rolled slowly across the broken skyline, as if the planet itself was exhaling after centuries of being held hostage. First by the Zorvax, then by the humans, and finally by the ancient truth that had waited patiently beneath its crust. Elder Thalrix stood at the gate's edge, looking out across the ruined capital. Where once towers of crystal and beauty stretched toward the heavens, now there were only scorched bones of architecture. But the Zorathi weren't rebuilding yet. They were listening. The gate no longer pulsed. It no longer hummed. It simply was. A relic, a monument, a warning. Since the being returned to wherever it came from, Thalrix had felt no more tremors, no more voices in his mind, no more visions of humanity's crimes. But he felt a new weight settle on him. Responsibility. The kind that didn't come from survival, but from knowledge. The kind that demanded you do more than just live. It demanded that you remember. Across the stars, things began to shift. Worlds once silenced by fear of Earth's retribution now found strength in shared understanding. The broadcast from Halarith's gate, brief, fragmented, but undeniable, had been captured by rogue elements in dozens of systems. Despite Earth's best efforts to erase the signal, it had already spread. People were asking questions. What were the gates, really? Why had Earth tried to bury them? And more terrifying still, what happens now that they're waking up? The Empyrean Coalition held emergency meetings. Trade union alliances collapsed overnight. And still, Earth remained silent, withdrawn, not because it was retreating, because it was preparing. In the depths of Luna Command, beneath a fortress carved into Earth's moon, General Halberd stood before a council of black glass AI interfaces. We have confirmation of 119 gate sites across known space, one of them intoned. 72 are pulsing. 16 have initiated low-level activity. 2 have opened. Another AI flickered to life. Halarith was a failure. Local extinction did not proceed. Gate entity emerged and returned without interference. Zorathi survived. Halberd clenched his fists. Then we clean up the mess. Containment is no longer viable, the AI said. Truth has entered circulation. The lie cannot be maintained. Halberd said nothing. He had served through 5 shadow campaigns, personally authorized the erasure of 2 colonies. He believed in the mission. The gates were never meant to be opened. Humanity had touched them once, long ago, and what had answered back had nearly destroyed them. That knowledge was never meant to spread. Earth's rise to power came not just from technology and war, but from the absence of competition. The other civilizations lived in fear because Earth had done what they would not: kill to protect the lie. But now? Now the gates were awake, and humanity would need a different kind of war. Back on Halorith, the Zarathi gathered in what remained of the Grand Nexus, a wide, open crater where the old city center once stood. Thelrix stood atop a shattered pillar, the light from the gate far behind him, casting a faint blue glow into the dark. He addressed them with a voice that shook, but never faltered. "We are not warriors," he began. "We are not conquerors. We are not ready for what has come." He paused, breathing slowly. But Earth didn't come to save us. They came to silence us. And in failing to do that, they gave us something far greater than protection. He raised his arm, the light of the gate shard embedded in his chest, catching the rising sun. "They gave us purpose." The crowd remained still, quiet, but not afraid. Not anymore. For too long we thought ourselves small. We believed survival meant submission, that peace meant silence. But now we know. We were lied to. A murmur spread through them, low and rising like the first notes of a storm. We do not have weapons. We do not have fleets. But we have truth, and the gates have chosen to speak again. He turned his eyes to the stars. And if Earth comes again, they will not find a frightened people hiding in caves. They will find witnesses, testimony, memory, and the entire galaxy will be watching. The crowd erupted, not in cheer, but in resolve, a sound deeper than rebellion, louder than vengeance. It was the sound of a civilization choosing to stand, and far across the stars, in places long forgotten, other gates pulsed in quiet agreement. The Deathworlders had answered the SOS with fire, but the galaxy had answered with something more powerful than war: awakening.